today we have a very special artist with us, and her name is Susan Livingston, and she is a participant in the Art Fest. Hi, Susan. How are you doing?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm happy to be here with you. I would like for you to explain to us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your practice.
Okay, I am a mixed media fiber artist. At this time, I live in South Carolina. I've been here for a long time. One of the things that South Carolina was known for a few centuries back was indigo. So indigo
Oh,
is, yes, we used to grow. That was a major industry in South Carolina before tobacco and before cotton, before rice. So, and it was brought here by a 15-year-old girl who lived in the West Indies. So it was an important crop for many reasons, including the fact that it was a young girl who brought it here. So indigo is part of what I use with my natural dyeing. I use a lot of other natural dyes too, and some of what a lot of people call kitchen dyes, like avocado pits and onion skins, which are one of my very favorite. So then I knew when I started dyeing that it would always have to become something where I could take it beyond that. I have been a stitcher, embroidery person for a lot of years. And I feel like that is a very unique thing. I do all my stitching by hand. So when I start stitching, it becomes something that is really completely mine. So I just keep going.
So you would say that is where you can see the artist's hand when you apply that layer of stitching in your work. What I'd like to ask you, so I'm so intrigued about this indigo. Can you tell me how much of your work is influenced by historical references? Indigo comes from Africa, so that's why I'm asking this question in one piece. But in the other piece, I want to know what other historical references, if any, influence your work.
Well, indigo does come from Africa, especially West Africa, I think, and it actually used to be a form of currency. Yes. Where you could carry a lump of indigo in your pocket and use it for money. There's actually not very many areas that indigo wasn't grown. Europe, okay. Not really. Japan is a very strong indigo culture, and they do something called Shibori.
Yes.
And that is a lot of what I do.
Can you explain to us what Shibori is? A lot of people who are not in the textile world, they have heard that term, but they don't really know what that is.
Well, when I am doing a piece of indigo, and I think this napkin kind of shows it. In this case, I have dyed the entire fabric, just a base color, very light. Then I fold it and I use what is called a resist, and I clamp that in place. And so when you do dyeing, and indigo is a very unusual dye, it is a fermented dye, whereas most other dyes that we use, you just put whatever material you have in water and you start heating it and you make your dye. Indigo requires a few more steps, and it then requires a reducing agent. And it gets to, when you look at your indigo pot, you see all this sheen of copper on top and bubbles. And when you dye with indigo, you very often do at least 3 or 4 10 to 15 minute dips.
So it's a very complicated dye process in comparison to other ways that
Right.
you,
You don't just throw the fabric in the pot and let it go.
okay, okay.
So,
Can you talk, can you talk to us about, your process is fascinating, and there is a historical reference to Africa and, as you say, to other parts. But what was surprising to me, that, indigo was grown in Carolina. That's a very surprise to me. But would I like to know, what is the subject matter of your work, if any? Do you reference nature? Do you reference figures? Do you reference, what do you reference?
it just depends on what I'm doing at that time. What is behind me are 3 out of 48 9-foot panels. That represents an installation I did 4 years ago, I think, at a large art exhibition.
Okay.
This installation is called Fragile Beauty, and it's reflective of the ocean.
Okay.
And so it was, these 46 panels were alternating, hanging from large frameworks that my son built for me. And we suspended them totally from a 16-foot ceiling, which right there was a challenge.
That sounds beautiful. Can you
Yeah,
tell us specifically about the works that are in the festival that are available for purchase and for viewing?
okay. One of the things I do, and I do a lot of, I'm doing a lot of napkins, dinner napkin, that type of thing. I love to use vintage textiles. So you'll get a neat edge. Some of them might have a little embroidery motif that then becomes part of it. I also have some tablecloths, some things like that. I also dye silk scarves. Um, this is one of my squares, for instance, and it's a different type of shibori.
That's great.
Actually, this is more similar to what we used to call tie dye, or
Is that silk? Is the material silk?
yes, all my scarves are silk. I love working with silk.
So how difficult, I mean, how different is that from using linen or cotton?
Well, linen and cotton takes a little bit more work, um, because they are not as conducive to dyeing as silk and wool are. So they just take a little bit more of a process we call mordanting, to prep the fabric so that it's ready to really dye. This little handbag is actually cotton and linen. And so
That's
it,
that's available. That's in the Art Fest this year.
yes, it is. It's a little Japanese inspired handbag that I make, and then I do stitching on some of them. Just very simple. It is not a handbag that you're meant to carry everywhere and put your water bottle and your heavy book, and it's an occasion bag.
Okay.
So that's the type of thing. I also do mixed media fiber collages. And
Those
so
are wonderful.
the background is very often pieces that I've dyed. And then I'll do some different things on them. I pick up things off the ground everywhere
I
I
see
go.
the feather. Yeah.
Yeah, the blue jay feather. And I feel like that's kind of honoring that creature. Part of that creature still lives. So I love to do these. And then I do sometimes larger panels that also have stitching. So I will have a little bit of a variety of things.
Okay, that will be available for folks to acquire and make part of their collection, and art objects that they can wear
Where,
and objects that they can use.
right.
I want you to tell me something. Tell me, how did you start doing this?
Well, I've been stitching for close to 40 years. I
Okay.
started doing needlepoint because my mother did needlepoint,
Okay.
and then just quickly started doing more experimental things, and then dropped the canvas that needlepoint is on most of the time, because then I could do more with it. The dyeing came about more recently because I've always had this quest for doing something to the fabric before you even start stitching, so that you have interest there that you can pick up on. I have this little piece of fabric that is naturally dyed, and actually I used purple sweet potatoes.
That's
I'm
very lovely, very organic. I love your palette.
this and
Very
so
rich.
get this kind of coloring, and I'm just waiting. I did this a while ago. I'm waiting for it to speak to me and say, okay, this is what you need to do with this.
Then
So
you spoke about the fact that you use natural products, organic elements to create your palette. What you use red onions? Tell us
I,
about the onions.
the onion skin, and it doesn't really matter what color, just because I'm using that purple onion, I'm not going to get a purple dye out of it. So
Oh,
you usually get a rich golden dye that if you add a little iron to it, you start getting a more amber color, or you can take it to green sometimes. And then I use avocado, and we use the skins, which I dry. And thank God I love avocados.
yeah,
So
I did too.
peels are always drying on my windowsill.
So there's a bit of chemistry in this whole process then.
I sure wish I had paid a lot more attention. Yes, I'm learning a lot more about chemistry because the mordants are more about chemistry. Indigo is very pH oriented, but so are a lot of the natural dyes. You can change the color by changing the pH of the dye bath. So
Interesting.
kind of an experiment, but avocados actually give a pinky, peachy, sometimes beigier tone, not a green.
Interesting.
Oh, like the flesh is yellow, but not anything like you think it should be. And it's always a little different, which is what I like about it.
So can you just recap one more time for the audience? I'd like to know your items that are available, just specifically. Just
Okay, going to have silk scarves, and some of them are long, and then I have large squares in various patterns. I'm going to have the little Japanese handbags. I have a lot of napkins, different sizes, and I have a few tablecloths. They're obviously a more ambitious project because they're bigger.
right.
I have some frame things that are going to be there, the mixed media fiber collages. And then I will have this hanging, for instance. This is one thing I did during this, I started during COVID, early COVID. And
Tell us
it's,
more about this particular work. What is that work about? Does it have a specific meaning?
it does to me, it is, it's the first piece in a new series I'm doing called Time Warp. And this is called The First Wrinkle. And I
Okay.
feel like with so many things with COVID, we've learned a lot about what we are not prepared for, the cracks in our system, the wrinkles that we've been working on smoothing. And there's just a lot of complexity in here. So
I like that a lot. That's very beautiful. So we have just a few more minutes. Do you want to tell us anything else? What would you like the audience to know that will be in reviewing your work and purchasing your work. We're going to claim it for the MPA Art Fest.
Right. I just am somebody who is very enthusiastic about what I do. I'm getting older, and so I keep going, and
You're
my work,
getting better. We're both getting better. Go ahead.
like, it gives me every day. There's something. There's a reason for getting up and starting.
Okay.
It was a little depressing for a while when everything was being canceled, because you thought, why should I make more work when I have all this work? But it was so nice when y'all decided to go forward. I had such a great time last year, and I felt like I met a lot of people. And I'm gonna miss not having a lobster roll for lunch, but I did meet people, and it was a beautiful day, and the presentation of everything was so great. But this is a whole new kind of adventure, and it's a learning process for me.
Well, I'm
And
very happy that you're continuing to make work because I feel that artists have played a very strong role in this historical moment,
I
as
think
uncomfortable as it is. But the ability for you to continue to create shows resilience on your part and what you're made of and your creativity. So I love your work and I cannot wait to view it.